Every puppy in a pet store window has parents you'll never see, and a story you will never know. Dogs who've never touched grass, never had a toy. Dogs whose jaws have been broken so they can't bark for help. They live in cramped cages, are forced to breed until their bodies break, and then they're discarded. Most people are unaware of the backstory and the suffering endured by these dogs. The breeding industry works hard to keep the truth hidden. For the last 15 years, Lori Greenstone has been fighting to shut down the puppy mill pipeline, the hidden path connecting these puppy factories and the retail pet stores where families shop for pets. And this year, thanks in large part to Lori's efforts, the pipeline will no longer run through Colorado. This is Puppies, Pandemics, and Public Health. Let's join the conversation between Dr. Lieberman and Lori about what puppy mills really are and how one state proved they can be stopped.
Welcome to another episode of Puppies, Pandemics, and Public Health. Today, I am very pleased to welcome onto the show Lori Greenstone. Lori, thank you so much for joining today.
My pleasure, John.
So, Lori, we're going to talk a lot about puppy mills and dogs today.
Okay.
And legislation to help them. If there were one thing that you want to make sure that our audience does not miss of everything we're going to talk about today, what would that be?
I think the most important point would be when people buy a puppy, either online or from a pet store, they are unknowingly condemning thousands of dogs to lives of misery in puppy mills, because that's where the mothers and fathers of your beautiful little puppy live. So I would say that would be the most important thing, is to understand what a puppy mill is, how you can help stop that misery. Go ahead and find the puppy that you're going to love and cherish without, as I said earlier, affecting the miserable lives of thousands of animals in puppy mills across the United States.
I know that you're an expert in this area. You know puppy mills, and they go to pet stores, whereas many of our listeners aren't aware of that, perhaps. How do you know so much about it, Lori? Can you share a little bit of your story as to what you've been doing in this space, how you got here, and why it's such an important issue to you?
February of 2011, which will be 15 years ago, I was down at the state capitol meeting with the Humane Society of the United States. They were talking about legislation. The Denver State Capitol, state capitol. And so I said, I'd like to be involved helping animals, just let me know what I can do to help you. Well, the state director at the time said, let's have coffee, and I've got a few ideas. So we sat down, we were talking, and she said, well, there's this one nonprofit, and they work to close down puppy mills. And I said, what's a puppy mill? And then they told me. And once I heard the story, I was compelled to do something to help. And I've been working on this issue and other animal welfare issues, but closing down puppy mills has been a passion for me over the last 15 years. So that's how I got started. And so at the time, there was a federal bill called the Pups Bill, which would have closed down the pipeline of puppy mills. So it was a federal bill, and talked to them about co-sponsoring the bill. So I actually studied for about 4 or 5 months, understood the horrors of what puppy mills were and how they are pipelined to the pet stores and also online. And I said, well, we've got to put a stop to that. So I started calling on our federal legislators, and we got, I think, 7 out of 9 of them to co-sponsor the federal bill. And that was great, but it's a federal bill. So even if I had all of the federal legislators in Colorado to co-sponsor that bill, you still need the state and Senate to pass it as a federal bill. And so I realized at that point that the best way to do that was to treat it on a state level. And we've been working for the last 15 years to ban pet stores from selling puppy mills, kittens, and puppy mill dogs. And we finally passed the law this last session.
Yeah, I'm so happy that got done. All the hard work involved in that.
Yes.
We're going to get to that later in the show, because I want our audience to hear about how the legislative process works and how it can work successfully to help animals.
Well, now, John, you're not supposed to ask a lady how old she is. But
right.
I'm 72. So 15 years ago, oh my goodness, I was a young thing. I was 57. Cats, horses, yeah, but dogs were a particular
Yeah.
passion for
So
me. Yeah.
you've loved animals relatively late in life. You learned about puppy mills. An important point I want to get across, not only because I'm late to the party, I didn't start having an affection for animals and appreciating all that they add to our lives and how much we can add to them until relatively recently. What Lori is talking about is not an exception by any means. It's in part because this is an industry that lives in the shadows, right?
Correct.
It's a system designed on purpose to deceive, to keep the
Yes.
public so unaware of what happens when you walk into a pet store and you see these adorable dogs bouncing around, playing and full of energy, but there's a life of misery behind that. And as
Correct.
Lori mentioned, when you buy those puppies, you're supporting that industry of
Correct.
suffering. So Lori, tell where do you want to start the pet store end of it or the puppy mill side and share what really is a puppy mill?
Well, I think it's important to know what that is before you can want to change the laws. A puppy mill is described as typically a commercial, what I would call factory farm for dogs. It's where dogs are kept in cages, sometimes outside with the elements, sometimes inside. They receive no veterinary care whatsoever. And when they are no longer able to produce puppies, they are disposed of. Either they are killed, they are dumped, or thank goodness there are some national mill rescue groups that will go and take the animals before they're discarded. But these are dogs that literally, you see a dog come out of a puppy mill, some of them have no teeth. They have years of matting and filth in their bodies. Their food and water, if they get any, it's contaminated or can be, not often that they're fed, because these people that run these mills, they don't care about the animals. All they're looking at is the money that they can get from their suffering. And so if you were to Google puppy mills and actually see for yourself what they look like, people that are not aware would be absolutely horrified. Years ago, when I was working on a city council level, I brought some pictures of puppy mills and I was doing a presentation to the city council asking them to stop that particular store from selling puppies. And they were notorious for selling puppies that were sick for various reasons. And we could talk about that in a little while. And I had packets together and I was distributing them. And one of the city council members says, "Are there going to be really bad pictures in here? Because I really don't want to see them." Yeah. So a lot of people don't want to know about puppy mills. It's interesting. And I'll tell you something I found out. And this is really horrific. You said they're in the shadows. Well, a lot of these places are out in rural areas or where people don't know, they don't have access. And I remember hearing about one puppy miller who would break the jaws of the breeding animals so they couldn't bark, so people could not hear them. Okay, so these are despicable human beings who care nothing about these animals other than a dollar sign. So that's what a puppy mill is. As I said earlier, I think of it as a factory farm for puppies. Only some of the animals in factory farms are treated even better.
We're talking about facilities of hundreds or sometimes thousands
Yes,
of dogs
absolutely. Yeah.
crammed into often windowless
Yes.
factory-like settings, like you said,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
sometimes cages, one on top of another,
Correct.
wire cages, right? So
Yes.
their paws can get stuck in them,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and the filth and waste, feces,
Mm-hmm.
urine of other animals
Sure.
gets contaminated. And like you said, veterinary care is
The
minimal, if any.
if any.
Socialization,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
and so it's a I want you to try and get that image in your head of what this looks like, a factory farm for dogs. I
Correct.
know for a fact Laurie's dog is spoiled. My dog is spoiled. Most people who have dogs in their homes treat them like family members,
Sure. And they are,
and
of course.
they are. And once you see this,
Yes.
I felt when I first learned of it much more recently, my reaction was very similar to Lori's in that
Yes.
I have to help. I have to try and help this process. And so it's the same animal. And I've had this discussion when we talk about dogs and research. The same
Sure.
animal can
Yeah.
be a family member, it can be a research test subject,
Yes.
or it can be a commodity on essentially a factory farm.
And I was going to mention something interesting too. I've seen quite a few videos from an organization called National Mill Dog Rescue, which is located in southern Colorado. And they post their videos online. And I've seen videos of puppy mill dogs being on grass for the first time in their lives and they didn't know what it was. Or when they're brought to the mill dog facility and they have given a blanket, they didn't know what it was. So think about that. The dog had never been on grass before. Some of them had never been outside before. Think about our dogs' lives. And then that's what really, I think, also resonated with me when I saw what a puppy mill was. And then I turned and looked at my dog and I thought, oh my God. And that's really what was the beginning for me. And 15 years later, here I am.
Here you are fighting for the dogs,
Yes.
fighting for the dogs. Thanks for sharing all that, Laura. I think that really helps
Hmm.
paint a good picture of what these facilities are
Sure.
like. And
Sure.
so the output of these puppy mills is puppies, hence the name.
Correct.
And
Correct.
so before moving on to where they go, when you're buying a puppy mill sourced dog,
Yes.
do you want to share, go dig just a little bit further what the life is like for the mama dogs? They suffer immensely in this scenario. And so when you buy the puppy, which is the output of the mother dog,
Yes.
they're what makes this whole world go round in these facilities. What are their lives like, Lori?
They're living in abhorrent situations like you described earlier. And all they do is they breed the dog over and over and over. And then once it cannot breed any longer, they're killed. Or sometimes they're dumped. Or if they're lucky, they're picked up by a mill dog rescue organization. And the people that have adopted these puppies or these mill dog survivors, I would call them, sometimes it takes years for these animals to allow the owner to pet them or play. A lot, they don't know what a toy is. They've never seen a toy. They don't know how to play. These are dogs that have drastically suffered, not just physically, but also emotionally and psychologically, because they only see humans as enemies, people that are going to be bad to them or hurt them or harm them. And so these animals they're so fragile, and some of them never recover. Even those that have been rescued from the mills, sometimes they just absolutely never recover. And it's tragic and it's wrong. And that's why this is, it's such an important issue that people become aware. A lot of times when we've done tabling events and we've had, let's say, a petition, for example, we ask people to sign and we'll say, well, something about puppy mills. And sometimes people say, oh, I know what that is. And other times people said, oh, what's a puppy mill? Just like I did. So there is more awareness than there was when I started. But just recently, I was somewhere and I was talking with some people, and a lady said, oh, what's a puppy mill? So the most important thing is getting the word out and getting awareness. People love animals. People of good conscience are not going to want to see this continue. And so that's why it's so important that you have this podcast, for example, and that people understand what this issue is and take steps to stop it. Once you know what's going on, you absolutely cannot let this continue. It's just that simple.
If people knew, I often say, if you could snap your fingers and 100% of the population knew about puppy mills and where they go,
Yes,
I think the industry would end of its own
it
accord.
would.
And so
Absolutely.
you cut out the demand 100%.
Correct.
Obviously that's not going to happen, but overnight, but that's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing. That's
Yes.
what so many
Yes.
other outstanding nonprofits are out there trying to increase the awareness, simultaneously working with legislation to help the process go
Yes.
along. Last
Huh?
word on the mother dogs. As Lori mentioned, they get killed when they're no longer needed. And that's really because they're not of value anymore. They're not of
Correct.
monetary value. And that's because their reproductive organs had literally given out and
Yes.
can't produce any more puppies.
Mhm.
And so in this world where they're viewed as commodities,
Correct.
puppy factories for the mama dog, that's when they're killed. When there's no more monetary value that the breeder can get out of them, they're killed.
Exactly.
Great. So Lori, I think we painted a great picture of what the mills are. So now let's look at it kind of what happens next. So there's a bunch of puppies coming out and ready to head to the market so that the puppy mill breeder can get paid. Where do they go? What's the market for these puppy mill bred puppies?
Well, there's typically a middle person who accepts the puppies and then arranges transport into Colorado, for example, from whichever state the puppy mill is located. And they'll bring them into Colorado, and they are literally bought by the pet stores. I've actually been to a pet store when a truck pulled up to deposit the puppies that had come from the mill. And something I also wanted to mention too that's important is these puppies are not necessarily healthy puppies. Many of these dogs have genetic issues. They were not ever socialized. They were taken away from their mother very young, not when they should have been with the mother for at least 8 to 12 weeks, but they're not. They're taken and they're put into crates and shipped off to whichever pet store wants to purchase them. And so again, so these puppies, and I've seen this, and one of the saddest things is when people unknowingly will buy a puppy from a pet store, and a short time later, that puppy is sick. And so they're either spending thousands of dollars trying to get that puppy well, or that puppy dies. So the puppies coming out of the puppy mills are not necessarily perfect, healthy bred animals. And I think that's an important thing to understand. So the mothers are suffering, but then again, these puppies are not exactly healthy, well bred for health and temperament as if they had come from a responsible breeder.
The deck is stacked against those puppies from the beginning, both
Correct.
medical health problems and
Yeah,
behavioral, right, Lori?
sure.
But like you mentioned,
100%.
they're taken away from their mothers earlier than they should be. They're not socialized like they're
Correct.
supposed to be, as they normally would, I should say.
Yes.
And they're set up for problems for the dog and physically, and that creates difficulty for the owner and potentially increased costs and significant stress. Adorable little creature into your, it's nothing but problems and hard to train because it's been of the situation it's been brought up. So it's just a bad setup all around for bringing a new furry friend
Yeah,
into
and
your
then
family.
this unsuspecting buyer, if they can't afford it, a lot of these puppies end up at shelters. So, they're not if the homeowner buys this puppy, and in many cases the prices are exorbitant. I saw for one example, I saw a bulldog puppy at a pet store here in Colorado that was selling for $3,500.
And what's the most that you are probably going to pay when you go to a shelter for a dog?
A lot less than that. A few hundred maybe.
I
Yeah.
volunteered there recently in
Yeah,
Colorado.
a
Three
few
hundred
hundred.
dollars was a lot. That was a
Exactly.
lot for a dog.
The other thing that's really just disgusting too that has surfaced in recent years is a lot of these pet stores will sell the puppies, and you'll have a contract to pay over time. It's like,
How does that work?
and what happens if you can't afford it, right? And there's an interest charge and on and on and on. So yeah, it's a real racket. It's a real racket, and it's they're just as culpable. A lot of the pet stores say, "Oh no, I buy from USDA facilities that are USDA regulated." Well, I hate to tell people, but that means nothing anymore. That means nothing. They have not enough inspectors for the entire country. And some of the facilities, and I've read these reports, they're lucky if they get seen once a year. And if there are violations, they don't always close these people down, and they just keep doing it. So being regulated and overseen by USDA means nothing. So when the pet stores say that, that's really a lie. And then they'll tell you that they've been to the facilities and met the people, and it's wonderful. It's a farm and the animals get to play outside and everything is sunny and rosy, and it's far from the truth. And we recently, when we were working on our legislation, we had a pet store owner testify that went to see, all of the different facilities. But what he didn't realize is we had a former animal control officer there who was going to testify, who'd actually been to his store and asked one of the employees if they had visited the all the facilities where he got the puppies from. And she said, "Oh, no, we don't have time to do that."
Lies and lies to just, whole system is based on, oftentimes they'll say what they think sounds good
Yes,
to the potential buyer to make the sale, right? Because that's really all
that's all it's about. I
that's
want to
all
get the
it's about.
dollars.
They want to make the sale, and so USDA certification. So you will often hear that
Yes,
because it's probably true that many of their dogs come from USDA licensed facilities. But
correct.
first, the standards, even if
Yes,
they're compliant with the USDA standards, they're
minimal,
so
minimal.
minimal and basic. They're really more like survival standards. The animal USDA certification of a puppy mill or of a commercial dog breeder guarantee the animal are cared for well.
Correct.
It's just their survival standards that, as Lori mentioned, aren't even enforced very well either. So the system of enforcement is deeply, deeply flawed. Thanks for bringing up the USDA, Lori. The transporter or broker, sometimes I think they're called, a bunch of dogs, packs them in a van, usually, right? Drives them across multiple state lines, and then takes those puppies where?
To the pet stores.
So retail pet stores, right, is the
Correct.
general outlet where they
Correct.
go.
It's exactly where they go. We know that for a fact. We have decades of documentation to prove that.
And so what are the chances if you go to a retail pet store that's got multiple puppies for sale that they come from a puppy mill?
100%.
100%.
100%.
So do not be dissuaded by what the salesperson is going to tell you, right? Like Lori said, they don't visit these breeders themselves. USDA certification is meaningless.
Yes,
The mama dogs that produce these puppies are raised in filthy, miserable conditions, and the stud dogs or the dads really don't have it much better. And from the moment they're born until the moment they get into that cramped van that they're loaded into and they're driven hundreds or if not thousands of miles across multiple state lines,
exactly.
getting to the pet store to be sold, the puppy mill pipeline, that's the term that's
Yep.
often used, right, Lori?
Yes.
That's the pipeline. And you can not contribute to it and help shut it down yourself personally by simply doing what, Lori?
Don't buy from pet store or also online, because some of the millers will sell online as well.
So watch out for the online sales, right?
100%.
If you can't meet the parents, it's
Don't
probably a
buy.
red flag that you should not be buying that puppy, because the high
Absolutely.
probability, if not 100%, that it came from a puppy mill. And if you're plopping down a few hundred or a few thousand for that dog, you're setting yourself up for a potential even more expensive and very stressful time trying to care for that puppy.
And also
And you're contributing to the problem.
potential heartbreak. I know of a story
Yes.
of a young boy who had lost his mother, a young boy, 5, 6 years old, and the grandmother wanted to do something to help him. So she went to a pet store in Colorado and bought a puppy. And a short time later, that puppy died. Can you imagine what that did to that little boy? So, case in point, heartbreaking on both
Heartbreaking there.
ends. Exactly.
Absolutely. I appreciate you
Okay.
sharing that
Of course.
story.
Yeah, it was
So
hard.
many pet stores out there which have successful business models not relying on the sale of puppies.
Well,
And
and you
that's
bring up an important point, John, because, when we were working on the legislation, and of course we're at the state capitol testifying, and you have to go through several committee hearings from the Senate and the House and different things. So you're hearing a lot of the arguments from both sides of the aisle. And some of the things that came up that some of the legislators wanted to know was, well, wait a minute, what's going to happen to these pet stores if they can't sell puppies any longer? And the pet stores were saying, oh, we're going to go out of business, our employees are going to lose their jobs, whatever. But the point in fact is that there are many stores that don't sell puppies that are very successful. And there are stores out there who have switched from selling puppies to what we call the humane model. And as an example, the Humane Society of the United States also has a program for those particular stores. If they want to move to a humane model, they'll come in and help them work towards that. And, the point was made that when a pet store stops selling puppies and decides to go to the humane model, they could actually bring in rescue animals or from the shelters. And this has happened successfully where a local shelter will partner with the pet partner and they'll bring in some of their animals to be adopted at the pet store. And so they can do that. They can also, as we were talking earlier, they can sell other products. And the thing that I found interesting, and one of the people was saying, when you buy a puppy, that's a one-time sale. But if you're selling other products and not puppies, you're going to have a repeat buyer. And when you make the change to become a humane store, that creates tremendous goodwill within the community itself. And you will get more and more customers because they'll recognize that you've done something to help the animals. And that's a positive, and they're going to want to support that store. And so they can sell anything related to animals and have people coming in every month to get their food or whatever they need products. And there's your repeat business. A lot more money in the long run than a one-term sale to just that for that one puppy. So that sort of takes away the question about, well, what are these pet stores going to do if they can't sell puppies anymore? Well, they have a lot of options, and there's a track record we know nationally of that working.
There's selling puppies is simply not required to operate a successful retail pet store. Personally, Lori's seen it personally. I patronize those stores and buy my supplies from them for my own dog. I'm sure Lori does the same. It's a great way to support your local small businesses and at the same time, not at all contribute to the puppy mill pipeline.
Exactly.
Now, Laura, you've been working on legislation quite a while in this space. You're familiar with it. One of the other opposition arguments, which I think is brought up, and in part because it often works, how are we going to keep up with all the demand for puppies? These puppies are produced in high volume. People should be able to say, I want a German Shepherd puppy. I'm going to go buy one. What do you tell the people? Like, don't tell me what I can and can't buy. I want X dog. How do you reply to that?
Well, I tell them there's a lot of places to buy animals. I mean, we have plenty of animals in Colorado, and we have 7 remaining pet stores that within the year they'll be not able to sell puppies anymore. So people have been able to go to shelters for decades to find dogs. And as a matter of fact, there's a large percentage of purebred dogs in shelters. There's also rescues that specialize in a particular breed. So if you want, for example, like a Cairn Terrier, if you wanted a Scottie, or if you wanted a German Shepherd, there's Scottie Rescue here in Colorado. There's German Shepherd Rescue. So you can find your breed in rescues, legitimate rescues in your state. And the other option, of course, is there are responsible breeders. And a responsible breeder breeds one breed only, and they breed for health and temperament. And they breed against genetic problems, which you will have with the puppies coming out of the puppy mills. They will insist that you go see them in person and that you meet the mommy and daddy dog and you talk to the breeder, and the breeder makes you a responsible breeder will actually have you sign a contract.
They vet you, right? They want to make sure you're going to be a good owner.
Listen, you have to be interviewed. Where do you live? Is it an apartment? Does your dog have access to a yard, depending on the particular breed? So they will ask you all these questions, and then they will make you sign a contract saying if you can no longer take care of that dog, they will take the dog back. In the lifetime of the dog, it doesn't matter when or where, they will take that animal back. They care about the breed. They care about healthy animals. And they care that their animal is going to a good home. And also, that helps the consumer understand maybe that isn't a good match, depending on what that breeder is telling you. These are the things that are important for that particular to breed that dog can do. And if you can't provide that, do a little bit more research and try to find a breed that's going to best fit your lifestyle. If you live in an apartment, you probably don't want a large dog that needs a lot of space to run, a lot of exercise, that can get out and have fresh air rather than, being in all the time. So these are just different examples, but the responsible breeders in every state and breed specific rescues and shelters. There are plenty of animals out there. Otherwise, the shelters wouldn't be full all the time. So I was going to say there isn't a lack of puppies and of dogs. Otherwise, you would have no shelters.
I think I recall reading that hundreds of thousands of dogs get euthanized
Yes,
every year just because they can't find a home.
correct.
It's sad.
So in addition, now that you say that, it makes me realize too to say that in addition to saving the lives of the dogs in mills by shutting them down, by going to a rescue or a shelter, you're saving a life there as well.
It's just a great process. It's a great to emphasize what Lori said about the breed specific rescues. I know there are a lot of people who want a certain breed of dog, and I want to make 2 points about that. One is those kind of rescues are all over the place. I love golden retrievers. They're probably one of my favorite breeds.
Sweet dogs, sweet dogs.
And I know in Colorado there's more than one golden retriever rescue group where you can go.
Yes.
And if you're set on having a golden retriever, you can get one.
So just to mention also, there are a lot of wonderful senior animals that are in shelters awaiting to be adopted. And so my husband and I made the decision, going forward, we will only adopt senior animals. We're seniors. So for me to bring a puppy into my home that could probably maybe even outlast me is maybe not a good idea. So senior dogs typically, they've been trained. Many of them have lived in a home before. And so, they're going to not be as difficult to train perhaps as a puppy or a younger dog. And so there's a lot of benefits to adopting a senior as well.
You can give a dog that may have had a lot of crappy life beforehand an amazing life for the balance of its time. So great idea.
And those senior dogs are always waiting for their mommy or daddy to come back and get them. They don't know what's happened. So if you can bring some joy and happiness into a senior dog, which is what we did 3.5 years ago for Dickens, who was a cute little 10-pound, John, you've met Dickens, senior. And at the time he had been dumped, so they didn't have any information on him, but they felt he was around 10 or 11 when we got him. And again, so the senior dogs, a lot of people overlook them because they want a puppy, but there's a lot to be said to bringing joy to that animal in the last years of its life, so it doesn't end up in a shelter and passing away in a shelter by itself.
Please consider what Lori said. Consider adopting a senior dog. And then I'm also going to make a plug for the change that I have made. As I started to say, I was fixed on golden retrievers for the longest time until I learned about all this, until I learned hundreds of thousands of dogs get euthanized because there's no home. So many purebred dogs, as much as there's an aesthetic appeal that a lot of people have, which is cultural largely, or a certain breed, there's so much inbreeding that goes on. A lot of these purebreds have genetic problems that give them health problems earlier in life than they would otherwise. And so everything that I know now, which I didn't know even 10 years ago, it got me starting to think about maybe I am open to a mixed breed dog. Golden Retriever is not the only way to go. Border Collie is another breed I really like. Maybe there's other options. And I volunteered in a shelter for a couple of years and saw daily mixed breed dog, couldn't even identify what they were. The most lovable. They have better probability that they're not inbred. Granted, you can get a sick or healthy dog anywhere, shelter, rescue, puppy mill, responsible breeder. None of that's a guarantee. The odds may be stacked in your favor by getting a mixed breed from a shelter. I can speak to it personally. I never would have thought 10 years ago I would get a mutt, but I've got one. She's amazing. She's a
is.
mix of multiple breeds, but those dogs with that unknown mix that
Mhm.
don't look anything like a purebred, they're all over the place. They're getting euthanized by the hundreds of thousands across the country,
Yes. It's heartbreaking.
and they make great companions. So just consider that next time you're thinking about a dog, if there's a breed you have in mind, which again, remember, it's largely social and culture, right? There was a time when
Mhm.
Dalmatians were all the rage. There was a time
100%.
when
Now
German
it's
Shepherds were
yes.
all the rage,
And now
right?
it's French
It's
bulldogs.
French bulldogs. So that comes and goes, and just keep in mind that that's driven by something that you don't have to fall into that if you don't want to. There's many other options out there if you just challenge those long held beliefs, which you may have had, which I know I had and I've done, and there's no going back. Would I say I'd step away from a golden retriever if I found one in a rescue? Probably not. I'd
Mhm.
probably be drawn to it. But for me personally, it's rescue dogs always
Yes.
going forward. You now know what puppy mills are. You now know not to go to a pet store. You have some other ideas on where you can go.
Yes.
And you have so much power yourself as an individual with the choices you make to give a better life for these dogs, to help this vile industry, to help shut it down. And Lori, teach us about what a little bit about what you've been doing. I know you've recently got some great legislation passed in the state of Colorado to help shut down this pipeline in the state of Colorado. What role does legislation and lawmakers have to play in helping fight this industry?
Well, basically, they helped us pass a ban that pet stores can no longer legally sell puppies. So it cuts the pipeline. If you cut off the need, the supply is going to cut off. And that's what you can do through legislation. So, our particular legislation, which was just signed into law by the governor last month, was really the culmination of a multi-year strategy involving efforts to pass forms of this legislation through the years. And then by going city by city and passing local ordinances to the point that we had a total of 26 cities in Colorado that had passed this law. And so the tipping point was really when we were able to pass the ban for pet stores selling puppies in the city of Denver, Denver being the largest city in the state. So when we went back to the legislature after several tries through the years, it was a lot easier to sell this to them because we already had 26 cities in the state of Colorado. We wanted to have something uniform instead of a patchwork. And so that was really, as I said, the tipping point was when we were able to pass Denver. And that left very few cities in Colorado. So by passing the ban, the other point that I wanted to bring up, I was just thinking about this, is some of the cities did not have pet stores. And so the city councils will say, well, why should we pass this ban? There's not a pet store. And we said that's the whole point. We don't want a pet store to open in the city selling puppies. By passing the ban now, you can stop that from happening. And there is a very large, I think it's called Pet City, national pet chain that sells puppies, and they're notorious for selling male puppies. And they were actually looking at the city of Denver as possibly opening. And so fortunately, we had an interested council member who approached us and said he was interested in it, and we're there. Whatever you need, we'll provide it. And so when Denver passed it again, that was the tipping point. So it's also you don't want a pet store opening, so pass the ban. You can stop it, because they will always try to look for opportunities. Where can I set up shop? Legislation cuts the pipeline. And the process through the years really of tabling events, having people sign petitions, spreading the word, going to city council meetings and talking about it to your members, or going to your state legislature and bringing that awareness to the problem also helps, because working on that legislation, you're exposing other people to the information that you have.
And getting public support is for any of
Correct.
this is very important,
Absolutely.
not just for puppy or for pet store and puppy mill bills, but for any legislation.
Exactly.
The public needs to
Hmm.
know, express their
Yes.
concern, and ideally, as happened here, the lawmakers listen. Get done with the legislature and basically saying the puppy mill pipeline no longer is going to run through our state, Colorado.
Correct.
And so that's shutting down the pipeline. No more demand is going to be coming from takes effect. And this builds on a growing network of states, right, Lori, where
Correct.
it's gradually decreasing the places where these puppy mills can ship out their dogs. And it's
Correct.
making it more and more difficult and making that business model more problematic, which is what we want, correct?
100%.
We
And
up to eight or nine states now, I think.
well, and it's a domino effect because when it was like in the city of, like in Colorado, you have different cities, and then the next city and the next city, it was like a domino effect. And I think it's the same thing across the
Yep.
United States.
It
And
builds
you know what
precedent,
happened?
right? It probably was easier in Colorado to do it than you could say, we've done it or it's been done in 7 other states.
Yes.
It's not that it's an easy process. I'm not suggesting that at all, but the
Mm-mm.
domino effect, you could say, and you could look what was done in all these other states. Why
Correct.
do we want to be the last state in the country to still allow this vile business model
That perfect. Perfectly said.
doing? And then if you want to share about your organization and all the good work you're doing.
Well, the bottom line is there's a lot of things you can do. If you're in the market for a dog, we've given you several ideas of where to find a dog. Not adopt. The motto is adopt, don't shop, right? Everybody's heard that. But the other things you can do is I wasn't looking for a dog when I got involved in animal welfare. So if you maybe do some reading and read up a little bit on puppy mills or different areas or maybe different animals that you might be interested, horses, for example. And there are nonprofits in every state. Some of them are shelters, for example, or rescues. Ours is a C4, and so we specialize in passing legislation, humane legislation. But you can work with other grassroots organizations in helping a particular animal that speaks to you. We had advocates for wildlife. We have advocates for farm animals, as well as animals used in research. Yeah, thank you, John. Like the 100 beagles or hundreds of beagles that were just rescued from a facility. So whatever speaks to your heart, there's a way to get involved. Read up and whatever speaks to you, get involved. Whether it's, as John said, going to a shelter and volunteering there, but there's groups like the one I mentioned at the outset. So I would say whatever speaks to your heart. And my organization, Colorado Voters for Animals, we've been around for 26 years. I've been involved for 15. And we basically work to pass pro-animal legislation on city and state levels here in Colorado. And we're proud to say that in our 26 years, we've passed and been responsible, directly or indirectly, for 50 pieces of legislation to help animals. Not just pro-animal legislations, but stop any type of legislation that could harm the animals too. So you can work to pass pro-animal, but get in there, and if you see a bill that's going to be bad, detrimental to animals, go against that as well, which we have done.
For mentioning that.
Sure.
And thanks so much for being on the show. I think our listeners got a lot out of it today. I appreciate your time and expertise that you have on this topic. Thanks so much for sharing all that today, Lori.
Thank you, John. It was fun. I enjoyed it as well.
Thanks for listening. These conversations aren't always easy, but they matter, and they're worth having. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more information, videos, and updates at johnliebermanmd.com. Take what resonates, ask questions, and keep learning. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not medical or legal advice and does not replace speaking with a qualified professional. Always seek guidance specific to your situation.